right, folks, we're gonna kick this off today. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. I'd like to welcome all of you today. My name is Mark McKearn, and I'll be your host today for Making the Mark. And with me today is author and founder of the Strategic Leaders Academy, Chris Kolenda. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, it's great to be here, Mark.
Well, by way of introduction, Chris and I know each other from our time serving together as leaders in the military. I'm now an executive coach and Vistage chair and have the privilege of leading a peer group here of small, medium-sized businesses here in the Phoenix Valley. I'm getting ready to launch another group of key executives, that being the C-suite folks underneath those CEOs, presidents, owners, and founders. I'm really excited about that and continue to connect locally here in the community. Some fun facts about Chris. Chris is a scholar and a warrior. He's really one of the first people ever to fight the Taliban and later come back in peace negotiations in discussions with them. He's been a trusted advisor to 3 different 4-star generals and secretaries of defense. The scholar, Dr. Kolenda, has written 3 books. His most recent book at the end of 2020 was Zero Sum Victory, What We're Getting Wrong About War. Chris is a great teacher about visualization and goals, and one of his goals coming in the coming year in 2022 is to ride his bike from Springfield, Nebraska, back to Arlington National Cemetery to visit the graves and honor the legacies of 6 soldiers that he lost in action. And Chris, really great to see you as a friend, great to see you as a scholar and leader, and welcome to the program today.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I hadn't ridden it's a pedal bike, so I'm going to pedal. And I hadn't ridden a bike in 20 years until about a month ago. So it's been a high adventure. So I've given myself about a year to train for this event.
Okay, well, we'll give you that much for that. We got a couple topics, but I don't think we'll probably get past the first one, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But I'd ask you to put your questions in chat, mute your mics until we get to the Q&A piece, and we'll address that throughout. Chris and I work with small, medium-sized business leaders in our local communities, Phoenix Valley, Chris back in Milwaukee, as well as across the country. And overwhelmingly, the topic that continues to come up in discussions with our leaders and what we see written and discussed around the country is retaining top talent, and then as you hire new talent, the retention of that talent. So, Chris, how about we start a discussion on that topic, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, it looks like we are on the cusp, on the leading edge of a massive employee turnover wave. According to the Wall Street Journal, more people have quit their jobs in the last month than we've seen in a couple of decades. We're on the other end of COVID now, and I think people are saying a couple of things. First of all, hey, it's post-COVID. I don't need this job anymore, this particular job, for job security. So I can now shop around because the economy's bouncing back. We're in the middle of a major business renaissance. There are lots of job opportunities, and so people are going to vote with their feet to what they see are better opportunities, better work environments. And second thing that people are doing are starting their own businesses. So one of the lessons I think a lot of folks learned from the pandemic was, hey, I don't want to be tied to an employer that I think is just gonna cut me loose when there's the next downturn. So I want to have some control of my own destiny. And so whether that is going full-time into your own business, like many of us do, or having that side business, that side hustle part-time, we're seeing a lot more folks do that too.
Yeah, really great point. Specifically referenced the Wall Street article. I just saw a study came out of Microsoft that said that they expect 41% of the workforce to look to rotate globally in the coming year. So clearly the retention piece is going to be a challenge, especially as the economy continues to grow. As you
Right.
think
And
about,
it's a staggering cost for employers. And what's insidious about employee disengagement and turnover, and those are two, of course, two different things, is that they're among the biggest costs employers face, and they're all hidden.
yeah, yeah. What are you seeing that the companies that are successful in the retention side of things? What are you seeing as their top 2 to 3 retention tools they're using?
Well, first one is that they're custom fitting jobs to people
Mhm.
rather than trying to shoehorn people into jobs. So the good leaders do the custom fitting. Human resources just is plugging people in, and that seems to be the big difference. And it reminds me a bit of when the Air Force was trying to get pilots into the F-86, the new jet, back in the 1950s.
Okay, I'm waiting for the punchline on that one.
Yeah. So the F-86 was the America's first jet, and this is at the start of the Korean War, and the Americans are trying to, we're spinning up for the war. We're trying to get pilots into these new jets, and so of course had gone first to the World War II pilots to get them in and start testing them out in the F-86. And the problem is that they had about 2/3 of the pilots who demonstrated great skills with propeller driven aircraft were just having a heck of a time on the jet. And the Air Force, they're kind of scratching their heads going, why is it that these pilots were so skilled with the propellers, and now with the jets it's too much? Are they too old to adapt? So there's ageism explanations. There's, well, maybe the jet aircraft is just too fast, and their skills aren't matching up. So we need to recruit new people with better skills. And they weren't quite satisfied with any of these conventional explanations. And so what they did was they looked at height weight data. I mean, they're looking at everything, and they looked at height weight data. And when they plotted people who were successful with the F-86 against the height weight data, they found that if you were 5'9" tall and about 160 pounds, you were doing great with the F-86. But if you were 1 or 2 standard deviations from that, then you were not operating the airplane efficiently. So if you were too, and so they're like, okay, well, this doesn't make any sense. There should be no correlation between height and weight and your ability to operate the aircraft. You know a lot about aircraft, Mark. And you also know that the biggest number one explanation for this phenomenon was it was a one size fits all seat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in a one size fits all seat designed for somebody who was 5'9" tall and 160 pounds, if you were much smaller than that, then you're sort of sliding around in the aircraft, and you can't maintain visual on everything and manipulate all the controls that you've got. And then if you're much bigger than that, it's a different problem. It's, it's like you're stuffed in a chair that's way too small. And so the lesson they learned from this is you've got to custom fit the seat to the pilot and not try to cram the pilot into a one size fits all seat. And it's a great analogy for businesses. How well are we custom fitting roles to people's affinities and skills rather than just hiring and chucking them into to something that looks like a good fit from a resume.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I think the successful companies are using the assessment tools, Culture Index, others like that, as they size up the candidates for the jobs and get them in. Now, the challenge facing these leaders, the first piece of this really like to drill down on is now that we got the people in the seats, and let's say we got them in the right seats, what are our retention tools to keeping them loyal and focused with the company they're with. I'll throw this out. Obviously a big piece of that that always comes up is employee engagement, the leadership engagement with them, and them feeling like a valued member of the team. Which then, if you back out of that, that's the culture of the organization, how they create a culture that makes people feel like they're a valued member of the team and a key contributor to it. You want to talk a little bit about culture and the impact culture has on the retention side of things?
Sure. I think one of the first key points about all of that is that there's a difference between affinity and skills. And we've got to put people, in a position where they're maximizing both if we're going to have real engagement and retention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there's another factor that, of course, is impacting leaders, and that's the desires and the wants and needs of the workforce in terms of the millennials and what motivates them and gets them going. It's easy for us baby boomers to throw stones at the millennials and talk about how they're different, but I mean they bring both an entitlement, they also bring a hard working ethic. They're curious about the why behind what they're doing, and they see that their higher calling is an important piece of that. Have you seen where have you seen the greatest success in this workforce in the millennials?
Yeah, well, both of us have led millennials in some really, really difficult situations. And, people complain about millennials all they want. I have no complaints whatsoever. And in some of the toughest situations, it was, these were millennials that were rising to the occasion. So I have little patience for, these sort of generational, millennials don't like to work hard. Well, nobody likes to work hard in a toxic environment. They'll work hard when you have a skills affinities match. So, I'm going to go to the drawing board here and, and show that. So you can see my drawing here.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the top, on the north-south axis is affinity. So affinities are like our natural strengths, things that we are naturally really, really good at. Some people are very detail-oriented. Others are very creative. Some people are sort of extroverted and very comfortable in a situation where they're meeting, networking, et cetera. Others are more introverted. They recharge by being alone. So you've got affinities, and then you've got skills. So skills are learned behaviors, learned habits. They're things that we can, they're capacities that we can build. And we too often will think of them as the same when they're actually two different things. And this is vital for custom fitting jobs to people and then removing the obstacles to their success. So when you're in a situation where you have low affinity and low skills, so somebody's in a job where they've got low natural affinity for the role and low skills, well, this is your disengaged population. They're marking time. They're just they're filling the day. Then in the lower right, you've got low affinity but high skills. So this population, you can imagine, is burning out. So they don't have a natural affinity. It doesn't match with their natural strengths, but they've got the skills to do the job. And so they're working harder. They're burning more, they're burning more energy. They're getting tired. They're getting frustrated. So imagine if you are a high creative and your job is to look at Excel spreadsheets all day. You can do it. You've got the skill for it, but it's just sucking the life out of you. And this is the population that's burning out, and they're going to exhibit a lot of these behaviors. and you're probably going to lose them. Now, above the equator, so to speak, we've got high affinity but low skill. And these are the people who are eager. They want to develop. They're asking why. They want to learn, and they want to develop the practical skills that allows them to thrive. So think of Steve Jobs, natural affinity for high tech, very low people skills. And the result is he gets fired from Apple, the company he founded. And so what did Jobs do? Well, he developed enough ability to have empathy, to see issues from other people's points of view. And as he developed those skills, he got into the high affinity, high skill area where, he's rocking it. And this is where it doesn't feel like work, where people are fully engaged, they're fully contributing. People in this quadrant are 2 times to 3 times more productive than people in the other ones.
So you're getting to the classic, putting the right people in the right seats, and as part of the selection and courtship process, as part of the alignment within the organization, that we see where their strengths work best. You triggered a thought when you talked about the low affinity the high affinity, low skills, and that reminded me about employee development plans, where you hire for a fit, but you train for the skill to put them into. And employee development plans, what successful companies the successful companies I'm seeing have an employee development plan that doesn't end with onboarding. They take their onboarding extremely important about feeling like a valued member of the team, extremely important about engagement and first impressions, but often that's where the employer leaves it. They don't have that holistic employee development plan that does the job specific training, but also focuses on the soft skills, the communication skills, other skills that are so critical for that individual to grow in their job and potentially grow within the organization, since the success of promotion within is much greater than bringing in new folks to a company. Part of that also is coaching and feedback. You want to talk a little bit about the companies you're working with and the success they're having on the coaching and feedback side of the employee development?
Oh, sure. But I wanted to jump on the point that you made a bit earlier about investing in your team. I mean, has there ever been a situation, Mark, where you invested in yourself professionally, or somebody invested in you professionally, and you got worse, where it didn't pay off?
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen, right? So that's why we invest in ourselves, and that's why we invest in people, is because it's always going to have a huge payoff, and you just have to be real intentional, of course, about what those investments are. And we all recognize this. And when our employer invests in us, it's a statement that says, I care about you. I believe in you. I know this is going to have a high payoff, and it's going to lead to a win for you and a win for the organization. When leaders don't invest in their teams, well, that makes a statement as well.
Yeah, no question. And I think a huge investment that sometimes is overcomplicated by leaders is just the fundamental discussions they have with their employees, the one-to-ones, whether that's a scheduled, whether that's an impromptu. I find often that leaders think there has to be a very broad structure put over the top of that is more agenda-like than natural flowing. And I've found that the leaders that just simply, when they meet and talk with their employees, ask them, what are their priorities? Because they may be surprised at what they hear. Think they may be thinking something different. and how they can support them to accomplish that, or what is working for them, both personally and professionally, and what is not working for them personally and professionally. And based on those answers, the next question is, how can I help you hit it out of the park and be successful? And those kind of engagement questions go a lot further than some of the more structured, numbers-based evaluations. Just open-ended questions and discussions go a long way towards employee satisfaction, their understanding of the why within the organization, and then their desire to stay with the team, because they feel like they're heard and they're a valued member.
Yeah, and I think there are two great issues here. The first one is just the one-to-one engagement, and then the second piece is feedback. So on the one-to-ones, those are great questions, and it's all about making sure, go back to the chart. It's all about making sure that we are moving people to the upper right. Mm-hmm. That's what the one-on-ones are all about. Hey, what are your priorities? How are you using your strengths is a great question. How are you using your strengths to achieve these priorities? What are some ways that we could get you could use even more of those strengths, or those strengths more often? And what are some of the things that I can do to help to support you, to make you successful? Because that's our jobs as leaders. Remove the barriers to success and help set people up for success. So get rid of the one-size-fits-all seat, custom fit the job to the person, and then give them this training, the development, the skills where they can rock it, where they can use their strengths to the maximum advantage. And these weekly one-to-one conversations with those kind of open-ended questions, with the intention of helping them succeed, removing obstacles to success, making sure we're on the, people are using their strengths and on the right, aligned on the priorities is vital. And a good rule of thumb is, in terms of, do we have too many direct reports or not? We ought to be able to have a one-on-one conversation. Could be just 15-minute one-on-one check-in with that finite set of 3 or 4 questions every week with each one of our direct reports. If we can do that, then we've probably got the right span of control. If we can't do that each week, then we probably have too many direct reports, and we need to rethink. Marcus Buckingham and Ashley Goodall have a great book called 9 Lies About Work. Mm-hmm. And they say that yeah, there you go. Christy's got it right there. And what they say, and Christy, you can correct me if I'm wrong on the data, because I'm recalling the data point, but I think
I'm in the first chapter, Chris, so take it easy on me.
Yeah, there you go. It's a significant difference. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's like 15 to 20% difference in productivity between employees that get those one-to-one check-ins and those that don't.
Yeah, no, he's got a lot of great points in there about leadership, and it really another way of looking at it, different than a Lencioni. I think a different spin. It all boils down to the fundamentals of those open conversations, communications, the listening factors with that. And I'm going to think of, there's another key nugget with that in his book that I'm going to think of here in a bit. But while I'm doing that, let's talk a little bit about, we talk about, that feedback in the one-to-ones. What are some other assessment tools you're seeing that are effective within high-performing organizations that are contributing to high retention of their employees?
Yeah, I think the one of the most important ones, and Goodall and Buckingham discussed this, is most of them completely ditch the traditional forms of feedback.
Mhm. And in terms of the survey piece, the 360s, the
Right.
DISC survey, others that are looking at personality and behavior within the workplace. Can you expand on it a little bit?
Right. So, yeah, we could tease out a couple of those. So the first point is that our our direct report, our supervisor to direct report feedback is completely broken. And part of the reason why it's completely broken is it too often is idiosyncratic. It reflects more about the person giving the feedback than the person getting the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So, if and it's what my one of my mentors, Michelle Flournoy, calls the mini me syndrome, where and it's all with the best of intentions. We want our direct reports to be successful, and if we are a certain leader type, and with SLA we've got pioneers, reconcilers, operators, and mavericks. If we're not very careful, we can give feedback that says, hey, I want you to be more like me. Because I'm successful. I mean, it's with the best of intentions.
Right.
I'm successful. And the reason why I'm successful is because, hey, I'm a pioneer. I am a visionary extrovert. And if you want to be successful, be more like me. So I want you to do these things to be more like a pioneer. And if the person receiving the feedback is a pioneer, that's fine. But if the person receiving the feedback is not, then you are in effect telling that person, hey, who you are as a natural person is not good enough, and you need to become more like me. That just completely turns people off. And so if we don't have, if we're not aware of how people of different natural affinities contribute differently to an organization, then we are highly prone to idiosyncratic feedback that is just driving people right out the door.
Yeah.
So that's the first point.
Yeah, no, I that's that piece. And then for those who are not familiar with Chris's, with SLA, his archetype is an assessment that determines the type of person you are. I mean, I think there's other assessment tools out there that do that, and I think they're very effective to understanding who you're talking to and how you're talking to that person. DISC being one of the more popular ones used by businesses. Some companies even going so far as to post the DISC results on the cubicles of folks, so you can see maybe what's going to motivate them. Maybe they need to be given instruction and being told how to accomplish something versus others that need a broad brush guidance with a little bit of vision, and they can run with that. And I think those tools can be effective used the right way, but of course your workforce has to be educated on how to use them.
Yeah, and there's a difference between the prom leader archetypes, which are very outward facing, how we contribute to an organization, and the personality tests, which are very inward facing. Right. And the other thing we like about prom, and I'll give a brief sketch here in a second, is it's a quad chart. So you can envision the entire organization in your head and where people are on that. It's much easier to do that in 4 boxes than it is in 16. And then the other point about that is there are no pejoratives in the prom archetypes. Now in DISC, if you call somebody a high D, I don't want anybody to get sick, but if you call somebody a high D, you are probably calling them a difficult person to work with. So what the prom is, I'll go back to the overhead cam. It's just very simple. It looks at some ways, 2 of the most compelling ways that leaders are hardwired. Some leaders are extroverted, So it just means that you recharge when you're with other people. Some leaders are introverted naturally, which means you recharge your batteries when you're by yourself. It has nothing to do with people skills. It just has everything to do with how you recharge. These are things hardwired into us. Some of us are very creative. We're high creatives. Others of us are very detail oriented. So if you're a high creative, you love whiteboards, you love overhead cameras and drawing stuff. If you're very detail oriented, you much prefer the Excel spreadsheets and things that you can really get your hands on. So when you put these two variables together, you get this really cool quad chart. So your extroverted visionaries are what we call pioneers. So pioneers are people who are innovators. They like to put together new technologies and ideas into new combinations for organizations. If you are an extroverted and detail-oriented person, you tend to be what we call a reconciler. So reconcilers are the people that manage all of the big egos around the table. They can build consensus. They can manage the consensus. They're sort of your natural kind of team builders. Your introverted and detail-oriented people are what we call operators. So operators are the types of people that get stuff done, right? They can synchronize complex operations. They can manage detailed schedules. They love complicated stuff, and they will make sure it's done to a high standard every single time. And then finally, your creative introverts are what we call mavericks. So mavericks are your big picture thinkers, your strategists, etc. Classic pioneer, Mark Zuckerberg. Classic operator, who Mark Zuckerberg brought on because he needed an operator, Sheryl Sandberg. Classic reconciler would be like Dwight Eisenhower. And an example of maverick would be Steve Jobs. So those are the different archetypes. And naturally, if you are having all of them on your team and empowered is really, really powerful. Making sure that your opposite oftentimes is present to balance you is key. And in this case, if Mark Zuckerberg tried to turn Sheryl Sandberg into Mark Zuckerberg, she wouldn't still be at Facebook. Or if Sheryl Sandberg, the operator, tried to turn Mark Zuckerberg into an operator, he would leave. So this gives you a language and a construct where you can understand what everybody's archetype is and do it very, very quickly, without a 100-question test, and then help them be the best version of themselves. That's what leaders do. We help people be their best selves.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great description of archetypes. Appreciate that. I did remember what I was thinking about Buckingham, and I think it's, I know you'll appreciate this because I'm going to talk about Aristotle, and that's not something that normally happens in my normal day-to-day conversations, but Buckingham talks about one of his 9 lies about, was it 9 lies about leaders?
Yeah, 9 lies about work.
About work, was that leadership is not a thing. And the piece that was intriguing about that is that a lot of leaders read a lot of different thought leaders. They read Lencioni, they look Collins, Sinek, all these folks, and they form a leadership style based on what they read and learn, and think that's the best way to lead people. And really the best way to lead people is to put yourself in the follower's seat and look at it, a reverse perspective of looking at what followership looks like, looking back up at you, and what inspires people to follow someone else. Again, hardwiring aside. And so I'll take it back to Aristotle, Chris. So I'm going to try to impress you because I know you're a scholar in that area. Is 3 things they look at. They look at that you have good sense, that you have good common sense as a leader. You make decisions that really makes good sense. That you have expertise, in that time and day and age was you were skilled at whatever your profession was. So you have whether you're actually proficient at every task within your organization, you're at least aware and able to have discussions about them, and your employee, you can be engaged with your employees in your interaction. And the last was that you have goodwill, and goodwill being thinking along the lines of a servant leader. You put the organization above the needs and wants of yourself, that you're committed to what's best for the organization in every decision you make. And if you can look at leading from those three perspectives and how you're showing up and being present with your people on a day-to-day basis, that then you'll be seeing it from the perspective of the follower. So
Yeah. I think the ancient Greeks called it arete. That's excellence, and it's exactly how you described it. With leadership, a combination of character, competence, and goodwill. And second is that leaders are, when we help people be the best version of themselves, and you've got to kind of know their archetype, you got to know their natural affinities and what skills they need to develop. You work with the natural affinities, you develop the skills, and custom fit around the affinities. And when you do that and you're helping people be the best version of themselves, then levels of engagement go up. I mean, just think about a leader who helped you be your best self, your best Christy, your best Sally, your best Jeff, your best Gary. And think about those who tried to turn you into somebody you weren't, and how you felt about that. The difference is quite stark. I put in the chat the leader quiz, so you can look at your problem archetype. It's 8 questions, very dirt simple, and it's all about getting you sort of on the dance floor in this quad chart, and then figuring out exactly where you are. It's a very, very handy tool.
Hey, Chris, shifting gears a little bit on what helps retain top-end employees and keep stability within a company. Let's shift a little bit to the leader development program. So the holistic approach that employers are taking with their folks. And one area that's I think very impactful is as they look at employees who have upward mobility potential within the organization. And I think successful teams that's a part of the interview process and onboarding when they look at where that employee could eventually end up in the organization, is the difference between career pathing. So the bottom-up approach where the employee helps define where they are and where they're going to go, versus the succession planning piece of it, more the top-down of looking at employees. I think both are very important in the employee development plan or strategy within a company. Both are different. What has been your experience in dealing with the career pathing of employees and how that can lead to success and longevity with the company?
I think a key point is invest in success, don't double down on failure. You want to invest in your best employees, and the reason why you want to invest in them is because it takes you to a new level, right? So problem solving is corrective action. It's restoring substandard behavior to standard behavior. Innovation, though, and growth is about going from a status quo to something beyond that. And that's where we want to invest in our top employees, our top talent, our most engaged, most productive. Those are the ones to really invest in, because they're the ones that take us to new heights. Just investing in remedial action is only going to restore the status quo, and the organization's not going to grow.
Yeah, a great point. I think it can be as simple as you decide to invest, is often asking questions. about where they see themselves within the organization. Sometimes we don't read them right. We don't move them in the right direction, and the career pathing, we're getting that constant feedback, reflecting on where they are, where they could go, and then designing a plan, showing engagement, showing that the company's there for them to take them to the next level. And it's an investment that pays back tenfold, and from a retention standpoint and cost.
Right. Right. It gets back to this issue of idiosyncratic behavior and career professional development, which is radioactive on the receiving end, and so you see it in organizations, you see it in the military, you see it even in small businesses where the idiosyncratic is, well, this was my path to success, and so if you take the same path I did, you're going to have the same outcome. And well, first of all, it's just not the case, and it can be really, really horrible advice because it wasn't just the jobs that you took on. It was the people around you. It was the support network. It was the development that you received that allowed you to be successful in these various roles. And so it wasn't about the rungs of the ladder, so to speak. It was the people who were around you, helping you up those rungs, that were most important. And they remove the obstacles to growth. They put you in a position to succeed. And when we can do that for people and put them in roles that match their natural affinities, then they're going to be hugely successful, and they're going to help our organizations grow. Again, if we try to shoehorn people into one size fits all seats, they're not going to be proficient at flying the jet.
Taking it back to the Air Force, I'm not sure I can appreciate that analogy always, but I'll let you have that one. Yeah, so I'd like to open it up for some questions. Any folks have some questions out there, but just a little bit of a recap. As we look at the landscape down the road, all things are indicating that while people will say they squatted during COVID, or maybe they didn't make the cut during COVID, but there was very low mobility, job mobility during the COVID timeframe. Most are predicting upwards up to 40% are going to be moving. So what are you doing in your businesses to keep those people, make them feel like they're valued members of the team and want to stay with it? It starts with how you've assessed them for what's the best fit, the right seat for them. Talked about by understanding that we don't try to shoehorn them into something they're not a fit for, to allowing them to be the best version of themselves and to grow with that. Employee development plan strategies beyond onboarding that include the feedback loop, the coaching, the one-to-ones, feedback that is meaningful to them, their ability to participate in the discussions, and help shape the career pathing that's best for them, and you recognizing that and finding the plan that works for them. What else is out there that we haven't talked about? I mean, we did, and again, I didn't mean to gloss over it up front. We talked about culture, the values, the mission, and the vision for an organization, and how important that is understood and lived by managers within the company, so that everybody's rowing in the same direction. Everybody's seeing the power of where they're going and the why behind it, that being wrapping itself around the whole organization, and not being a bumper sticker, but more be about how the people live within the company. What else is out there? What are some questions others have about retaining top end employees within their organizations? Chris, what did I miss there? I'm sure there's some glaring misses on tidbits out there.
No, not at all. So while folks are thinking of questions, I just want to build on exactly what you described, which is what I call a common good. Does everybody understand the organization's common good, your mission, your vision, your goals and values, and your strategies to get there? So based on that, if you've got a common good that's well defined versus common good that's poorly defined, so the north-south axis, east-west axis is levels of commitment. So low commitment, high commitment. Gives you 4 different broad kinds of cultures. So if you have an organization that has a well-defined common good but low levels of commitment to it, you are in a compliance culture, right? So this is the culture where the leaders spend all of their time supervising and making sure that people are doing their jobs. You've got low level of commitment, so you got low levels of initiative, and the leaders can't focus on growth and development because they're always focused on compliance. If you have a poorly defined common good and low levels of commitment, then you've got a chaotic culture. So this is a culture in which the office alphas are running amok, and they are really laying the ground rules, like what happens in the halls and the Zoom calls is much different than what is written on your walls. So chaotic cultures often can be very, very toxic. The office alphas may not, because it's a poorly defined common good, they're operating in self-interest and not collective interest. If you've got a poorly defined common good but high levels of commitment, you have a contingent culture because it's contingent upon a few founders that have a very symbiotic relationship with one another, so they know how each other thinks. You see this in small businesses all the time. They just communicate implicitly, and it works until you try to scale, or until you lose some of the founders, and this implicit understanding atrophies, and the organization winds up, the culture winds up backsliding here. Of course, where you want to be is in the upper right, a well-defined common good, high levels of commitment to it, and this is where you get the inspiring culture, where people are doing what's right the right way without the leaders having to watch, which then gives the leaders the opportunity to spend time on growth and strategy and developing people rather than making people do their jobs.
I love the way you use the quads. It makes it's such a common sense way of looking at challenges. Got a question from Gary. Gary, if you want to jump on.
Yeah, Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So, Chris, I like the way you've framed up the issues internal to a company. My question, given COVID and a lot of employees have been away for, in some cases, over a year. My context, just to frame it up, I'm a corporate finance professional. I work with a lot of large and small companies. So I see a lot of different cultures. And what's fascinating to me is the external impact that COVID has brought onto the company culture, the system. And by that, I mean, I think as leaders, we've all experienced isolated events where we have key employees that may have had family issues, be it health issues, and they were impacted by external factors outside of the company, which had a correlation to disengagement. But what I've observed, and my question is, how as leaders do we measure, if at all, whether or not that disengagement is associated with not only at the individual level, but maybe in a team environment, or maybe it's pervading or persuading the entire culture of our organization. Parents with children in school that have been out of school, and there's a broad-based impact to large segments of our workforce. I guess that's a starting point for the question, because none of what you've talked about is external, it's all internal.
Right. And there are externalities that affect employee engagement and retention that we can't control. One of the great ways to check for those is these one-on-one check-ins. And one of the questions is, hey, how are things going? What, how's your health? How's your family? And then when you get in, through the conversation, with the relationship, people say, hey, I've got ailing parents on the East Coast, and I'm actually going to need to move to be over there. So you'll know through these conversations if you've got the quality relationships, if there are externalities at play, and of course we can't control that. What we can control are the internalities, so to speak, and a way to think about that are the ABCs of a good organization, and that's accountability, buy-in, and clarity. So accountability are people doing the right things the right way without being watched. Are people accountable for their actions? Leaders first and foremost. Buy-in. Are people bought into your vision, your mission? Do they have commitment? And then clarity. Do they understand? At the risk of more overhead cam, I'm just going to do it anyway. So this time, instead of quad chart, I'm going to do Venn diagram. So you've got clarity, accountability, and buy-in. And you've got to have all three. Success, of course, is right here in the center. If you've got clarity and you've got accountability, but you've got no buy-in, then it's your compliance, and people are not going to give you their discretionary effort. If you've got buy-in and accountability, but no clarity, then your organization, you're just simply running around in circles. You don't have a clear idea of where you're going. And if you've got clarity and buy-in, but you've got no accountability, then your organization just get lucky. You don't have the processes in place to make results repeatable. So you've got to have all three. So I think on the internalities, when you have the ABCs in a good place, then your life is good. You're going to boost your intention, your engagement and retention.
Okay.
Great question, Gary.
Thank you.
Well, Gary, one thing I'd like to add there in the last few minutes is bring up a topic about returning workforce or getting back to what is the new norm. The discussions on hybrid. Chris, you've written a bit about this as well. I've read a couple numbers that are out there. Is that 32% of the workforce never wants to return to work.
Right.
21% of the workforce never
to the
wants
office.
to stay home again. No, they never want to stay home again. So, and then there's another key factor is that 50% of the not return are women with small children. Yet the statistics say that people that work remote have reduced promotion potential just by the nature of it. So it's a balancing act that that was our second question if we got to it today. And this could be certainly another call, Chris, is that how you're dealing with that environment, that hybrid environment that is putting your high performers in the best position to succeed, that's doing what's best for your organization and your business, but understanding that conditions have changed, some perspectives have changed on it. Ultimately, you got to do what's best for your business, but how do you do that? And there's not time to share what one of my CEOs did, but the key was he put together an action team of not his executive team, but at every level, at every segment of his company, at the lowest level, a tiger team to look at this challenge and come back and brief the executive team on what they think the best way moving forward was. And it was a phenomenal bottom-up perspective on it, a grassroots level perspective that has made a dramatic difference in the performance of the organization, morale, and productivity moving forward because they listen to their employees and what to do. Now, again, I don't think this is a democratic process in the traditional sense, but I think that kind of feedback is important.
Yeah, it's about gaining buy-in.
Yeah.
There's some wrong answers to this balance. Like the WeWork CEO said, well, I know who the most engaged employees are because they're the ones that want to come to the office. Like, come on, really? And then you've got the Washington media was threatening people who didn't come to the office with, you're more likely to get fired. Yeah. So there's some definite wrong answers on this. In the chat, I had made a typographical error on the first link to the leader quiz. So I fixed that subsequently. So it's there for you. But Mark, it's been a pleasure being here with you.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks to those that tuned in. And again, if you want to learn more about what Chris and I are both doing in our different practices, please reach out to us, message us direct. Love to hear from you. Chris, always a pleasure. Look forward next time we're together. And for everybody on today, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Mark. It's great being here.
Have a great day.